They put a woman in my coat and taught her to sign my name. The bank manager called me at 2:17 and spat it into the phone before I could sit down. My husband was in her office. Beside him, a stranger wearing my mother's pearl brooch, my haircut, the little dark mark at the corner of my mouth painted onto her skin. She had already carved my signature across 3 transfer forms. Gordon leaned in and kissed her temple the way he had stopped kissing mine years ago, and something in my chest tore loose and would not settle. I stood between the garden shelves and swallowed it. For 30 years, I sat at the bedsides of the dying and watched families ignore every small sign until the end dragged them under. A hand that goes cold too early. A breath that changes. I learned to read what people beg you not to see. So I did not scream. I did not call him. I gripped a bag of soil I no longer needed, and I watched them hand my life across a desk like it belonged to strangers. They dragged my name through that bank, and they smiled. They had counted every account forged, every document rehearsed, every gentle lie. They forgot one thing. My name is Valerie Colton. I am 63 years old, and for nearly 3 decades I nursed people through the last months of their lives. Hospice work teaches a strange patience. Dying is almost never a single moment. It is a long chain of small changes that everyone around the bed decides not to notice. The appetite that fades. The sentence that trails off. The afternoon a strong man cannot lift his own cup. Families beg you to call it sudden because sudden is easier to forgive than slow. But I sat through the slowness. I learned to name it out loud when no one else would. Marriage ends the same quiet way. The stranger arrives in pieces. A door that shuts a little harder. A phone turned face down on the counter. A kiss that lands without heat. You notice each thing and talk yourself out of it because love trains you to protect the person you trust even from the truth about themselves. I set the soil down and walked to the parking lot without running. Panic makes people careless, and I had spent my career cleaning up after carelessness. My old green Subaru waited under a live oak. Gordon hated that car. He said it made us look like people who could not afford better. That was his oldest fear. Not being poor, but looking poor. I drove into Wilmington while Rosalind Hale stayed on the line. She had managed our branch of Tidewater Savings and Trust for 12 years, and she was breathing the careful way people breathe when they are trying not to frighten someone. "Tell me what you see," I said. "Your husband is in the Navy blazer," she said. "The woman has your license, your passport, and a letter from a physician stating you have significant cognitive decline and that he holds authority over your affairs." My hands tightened on the wheel. The cream coat was mine. The brooch had belonged to my mother, and it lived in a velvet box inside the bedroom safe. Someone had opened that safe. "What is she asking for?" I said. $540,000 moved out of your retirement account into escrow. The receiving entity is Colton House Hospice. The pressure in my chest changed shape. Until that sentence, I could still imagine a stranger had fooled my husband. But Colton House Hospice was not a stranger. It was my son. Wade had opened that clinic 4 years ago, and for a while I had been proud enough to help him. That was not an accident. That was a route, and routes always lead somewhere worse than where you start looking. I pulled into the service alley 7 minutes later. Rosalind had unlocked the steel delivery door and stood inside it, pale, holding her badge like something she wanted to give back. "Valerie," she said, "I am so sorry. Show me," I said. She led me into a dark room behind the executive offices, one wall mirrored on the far side. I stepped up to the glass and my mind refused for a moment to translate what my eyes were sending. Gordon sat with one ankle crossed over his knee, calm, almost bored the way a man looks when the difficult part is done. He was supposed to be 500 miles away at his brother's hospital bed. Instead, he was 10 feet from me, pressed and healthy and lying without opening his mouth. Beside him sat a woman wearing my life, my coat, my mother's brooch, my haircut, and the small dark mark near the corner of my mouth. Mine came from a fall when I was 6. Hers had been painted on that morning. She kept her hands folded, the left thumb over the right, exactly the way I hold mine when a family is telling me the thing they are most afraid of. Someone had studied me patiently for weeks. Gordon placed his hand flat against the middle of her back and smiled at her with a warmth I had not been shown in years. What I could not get back was the softness in his face spent on a stranger who had learned to sit like me. On a monitor, Rosalind pulled up the forms. The woman had signed my name 3 times. The signature was good. Not perfect. I have always lifted the pen a half beat before the last stroke of Colton, a hitch I never noticed until I saw it missing. The forgery ran straight through one clean line where mine breaks. She says the money is for your long-term care, Rosalind said. He says you refuse help. Through the glass, I watched Gordon lean in and murmur. His phone lit up on the desk. Wade says the aide is getting nervous. Close this today. NID, my son's clinic, my money, my husband, a stranger wearing my face. The pieces did not form a whole picture, but I have never needed a whole wreck to know something has come apart. Call the police, Rosalind said. We can hold them. I watched Gordon check his watch. If officers walked in now, he would weep and claim the woman had fooled him, and he would be believed because being believable was the only real trade he had ever mastered. Wade would deny everything. The aide would vanish along with the reason my son needed $500,000 before dark. Arresting the person holding the match does nothing if you never find who soaked the house in fuel. No, I said. Valerie, they are stealing your retirement. They are showing me exactly what they want me to see, I said. I need to know what they are hiding behind it. I asked whether the bank could run a controlled transaction. Rosalind said the branch had a fraud protocol for suspected exploitation of an older customer. Once she flagged the account, the fraud unit could authorize a hold that looked approved on the customer side, while the funds never left the institution. Every keystroke and account number and device would be captured. Gordon and the woman would walk out believing the money was moving. It would sit exactly where it was remembering everyone who touched it. Do it, I said. 10 minutes later, an approval appeared on the desk monitor. Gordon's shoulders came down. The woman let out a long breath and squeezed his hand. They believed they had won. At the door, he bent and kissed her temple again, practiced and easy. I had walked in thinking someone wanted my money. By the time he disappeared into the lobby, I understood they wanted my name, my judgment, my home, and my right to speak for myself. What are you going to do? Rosalind asked. First, I said I am going to find out why my son is afraid of an aide. Then the hospital returned my call. The nurse sounded confused when I asked about Gordon's brother. His surgery was postponed 2 weeks ago, she said. He has not been admitted. We have no record of anyone visiting on his behalf today. I thanked her and hung up. Somewhere out on the road, Gordon was driving away with a woman in my coat, certain I was home waiting for news from a bedside he had never gone near. He had forgotten who he married. I have spent my life sitting still beside slow disasters, naming what everyone else refused to name. This time I would not arrive after the fall. I would be waiting at the bottom of it. Before I tell you what I found in my own house that night, tell me in the comments where you are listening from and whether you would have called the police in that alley or done what I did. Gordon came home at 11:43 carrying a paper gift bag in the face of a man who believed he had rehearsed every question. I sat at the table in the dark, watching the harbor lights shiver through the window. From a distance, the water looked calm. Up close, it never was always pulling in 2 directions under the surface. People are the same. The ones who look calmest are often spending everything they have to hold down what moves underneath. Val, are you up? He called. At the table, I said. He switched on the pendant light and stepped into it like an actor finding his mark. His collar was open. He had rubbed the skin under his eyes raw the way eyes go after hours beside a hospital bed. Gordon had spent his working life selling medical equipment closing rooms full of skeptics with nothing but a well-built story. He knew how to stage a scene. I had once admired it. I had not understood the same gift could hide rot under fresh paint. How is your brother? I asked. Stable. It was close. 2 arteries. I stayed until he woke up. Every detail came at the right speed. Not fast enough to sound rehearsed, not slow enough to invite a follow-up. He reached into the bag and pulled out a white mug printed with the name of a medical center. A price sticker was still stuck to the bottom. Saw this in the gift shop, he said. Thought of you. That was thoughtful, I said, turning it slowly. The gift shop closed at 8. Gordon had been inside my bank after 2 that afternoon, 500 miles from that shop, and no aircraft bends time that far. He leaned across the table and kissed my forehead. That was when I smelled it. Spirit gum, face powder. A floral perfume that was not mine worked into the wool of his blazer. Years in sick rooms taught me that smell survives where the eye has been cleaned. Gordon's jacket smelled like a dressing room. You look tired, he said. Have you been sitting here long? I let my eyes drift to the black window. I am not sure. I lost track of time. Something moved in his face. Not concern. Interest. You have been doing that a lot lately, he said. Losing track. Have I said. A little. He put his hand over mine. Nothing serious. We will talk tomorrow. Mine ended under that light, while my husband used tenderness as an instrument, testing whether I could be filed away as a woman who no longer knew the day. He carried his bag up and went straight into the shower. He always showered after flying, he said, hating the recycled air on his skin. Tonight he had been nowhere near a plane, but a habit makes excellent cover. I waited until the water was running, then went up. His suitcase sat open on the bench. Gordon was careless with luggage because for 36 years I had unpacked it. People are easiest to investigate where they expect to be waited on. I pulled on cotton gloves and went through the case without disturbing its shape. 2 clean shirts. Under them a receipt from Ashwood Theatrical Supply. Gray lace front hair. Medical adhesive. Contour wax. Skin-safe pigment. $1,480. I photographed it. In an inner pocket, a hotel key sleeve, room 614, and behind it, a dinner receipt for 3. Gordon Colton, Wade Colton, Cassidy Vaughn. $812, 2 bottles of champagne. People do not celebrate before a crime unless they are certain the victim has already lost. Deeper down, a folded copy of my birth certificate. The original was locked in the safe behind the same door as the brooch. A photocopy of my passport. A scan of my nursing license, the one that took 2 years of school and a career to earn. Whoever wore my face had been handed the raw material of my whole identity. The shower stopped. I put everything back and crossed the room as the bathroom door opened. Gordon came out with a towel around his waist and steam rolling behind him. "What are you doing?" he said. His voice was light. His body had gone still. Looking for my reading glasses. I opened my nightstand drawer and stared into it a beat too long. I thought I left them here. They were on top of my head. His eyes went up, then back to mine. "Val," he said softly, "they are on you." I touched them and laughed, embarrassed. "So they are." The tension left his shoulders. "You really do need to slow down." That was not comfort. That was confirmation. He believed he had watched another symptom. Downstairs, my phone buzzed. The alert came from the encrypted archive, where I keep my old files, including the review memos from when Wade first opened the clinic and asked me to check a stack of patient charts to lend the place credibility. I had flagged something in one of those memos, a pattern in the admissions that did not sit right, and when Wade brushed it off, I quietly stopped helping. Beside that memo lived my dated calendars, the records that could prove where I actually was on any given week. 6 failed logins in the past hour, with my correct username and 2 security questions answered correctly. The source was Colton House Hospice. They were not after my bank records. They were after that memo, and after the records that could ruin whatever they had built on my name. The floor creaked. I closed the window as Gordon came in. "What are you looking at?" he asked. "Tomorrow's weather." "You hate flying in bad weather," I added, folding his habits into mine on purpose. "I do not fly, sweetheart. Wade flies. You are thinking of Wade." "Of course," I said, lowering my eyes. "I knew that." He watched me a moment, and I heard the conclusion drop into place behind his eyes. "Wade and Paige want us to have lunch tomorrow," he said. "They are worried about you. We all are." That is one of the most dangerous sentences a person can hear. Cruelty rarely introduces itself honestly. It arrives dressed as protection, asking you to give up one small freedom at a time. "Lunch sounds nice," I said, and put my hand over his. And for the first time in 36 years, I lied to him and felt nothing but calm. The restaurant sat on a bluff above the Cape Fear, all glass and white cloth. Gordon drove us talking about the view and how good it would be for the 4 of us to have a calm family conversation. Calm is a word people reach for when they have already decided you are the problem. They want you quiet enough to manage. Wade's new truck was under the canopy deep green dealer plates wheels that had never touched a real road. Colton House had missed payroll twice that spring, yet my son had bought a machine worth more than some houses. The closer people come to losing everything, the harder they work to look untouchable. Wade came out before Gordon finished parking. "There she is," he said, arms out. "You look good, Mom." His hands barely landed on my back. Paige waited at the door with a leather folder against her chest and asked slowly whether I had slept well. "Fine," I said. "Did you?" Her smile went thin. They seated us by the windows. Wade ordered sparkling water without asking anyone. Gordon put his hand over mine. Paige kept the folder beside her plate. Every detail had been arranged before I sat down. The only thing they had not arranged was me. "Mom, Wade said we wanted to talk because we love you." There it was, the soft cloth laid over the blade. "That sounds serious," I said. Paige slid a glossy brochure across the cloth. An elderly couple in a garden under the words Cedar Hollow Memory Residence. Dignity, comfort, security. It is inland, she said. The air is drier. It might be good for you. Good for what I asked. The three of them traded a glance so fast most people would miss it. The confusion, Gordon said gently. What confusion, I said. Wade leaned in. You left the clinic's back door unlocked last month. I never had a key to that door. You called me at 2 a.m. asking where Dad was. I had not. Paige touched my wrist. And you drove halfway to Southport when you meant to go to the pharmacy. I let my mouth fall open, did I? You do not remember, Gordon said, squeezing my hand. I looked at the brochure and let the silence grow. Silence unsettles dishonest people because they cannot tell whether you are surrendering or thinking. Wade mistook mine for fear. This is not a punishment, he said. Cedar Hollow has private suites. Nurses. You would not have to worry about the property. My property takes care of itself, I said. For now, Gordon said. The dock needs work. The grounds are too much for one person. One person, not two. He had already removed himself from the future he was describing. And what happens to the land, I asked. We would explore options, Wade said, looking at the water. A care group has expressed interest. Nothing formal. How much interest? Around $4 million. The waterfront makes it valuable. We would protect the proceeds. For your care. Protect. People who want to take something often rename it protection. And the garden, I asked. That stopped him because he knew what it was. I had built it over the cottage lawn with my own money and my own back. A memorial garden for the families of patients I had lost a bench for every year I nursed. People still drove out to sit there. The care group would flatten all of it. We would relocate the plaques, Paige said, as if that were the same thing. The waiter brought coffee. I reached for mine and let my hand shake. The cup tipped, struck the saucer, and sent a dark stream into Wade's lap. He shot backward with a curse. Mom. Paige grabbed napkins. Gordon produced careful alarm. Val, what happened? My hand slipped, I said. Wade stood, coffee running off his jacket. For one full second, the polite mask dropped, and I saw what was under it. Not fear for me. Disgust at the broken thing his mother had become in his mind. I will help clean up, I said. Just stay here, he snapped, then softened it. I will use the back. He went left toward the staff area. I waited 30 seconds, then rose unsteadily. Restroom, I said, and waved Paige off. The hallway split near the service door. Wade had gone left. I went right to a door marked private, the office he used to meet care group people who preferred the marina to the clinic. It was not locked. Arrogance leaves open the doors caution would have closed. Blinds drawn. A laptop between 2 stacks of paper. I moved fast. The first stack was collection notices, together just over $900,000. The second was a purchase agreement for my land. Buyer Meridian Care Group. Price $4,200,000. Closing in 6 weeks. My signature line already prepared, waiting for a hand that was not mine. The third stack was worse. A subpoena, and clipped behind it, a civil investigative demand from a federal health office, the kind that goes out when someone believes public money has been stolen. Under it, a handwritten list. Names down one side, dollar amounts down the other. An aide named Curtis Boyd. A records clerk. People priced like parts. At the bottom, in Wade's hand, 3 words. Find Mom's memo. I was not only selling my land. He was hunting my old files because something in them could bury him, and he needed me discredited before I could say so out loud. I photographed every page and touched nothing else. I had considered bringing a recorder and decided against it. In this state, I could lawfully record any conversation I was part of, but no conversation was happening in that room, and a device left to catch one I was absent from would poison everything I gathered. Footsteps in the hall. I slid the papers back and turned toward the bookshelf as the door opened. Wade stood there, his stained jacket over his arm, eyes going from me to the desk. What are you doing in here? My pulse struck once hard, then steadied. Looking for the restroom. This is my office. I looked around, embarrassed. Then I took a wrong turn. He studied me long enough to make the mistake believable, then his shoulders came down. Come on, Mom. He took my elbow. This is exactly what we are talking about. He walked me back where Gordon and Paige waited with the brochure squared beside my plate. I apologized for getting lost. They believed it because they needed to. This was not only theft. If it had only been theft, I could have stopped the sale and lived. But they needed me erased on paper for two reasons at once: to empty my accounts and sell my land, and to make sure that when a federal office came asking about Colton House, no one would believe the nurse whose forged signature was on the very charts under investigation. My name was not collateral. My name was the target. Roy Tillman found her in 2 days. 22 years chasing insurance fraud, a dented thermos, no patience for drama. He set a thin folder on my passenger seat. Cassidy Vaughn, he said. 51. Former cruise singer, some regional theater cosmetics work between gigs. 3 months behind on rent. 2 charges for driving under the influence. $47 in checking. I studied the photograph. Without the wig and the painted mark, Cassidy did not look exactly like me. Narrower chin. Softer eyes. The stoop of someone who had spent years apologizing for taking up space. But Gordon had not needed perfection. He had needed a resemblance strong enough to survive a hurried transaction backed by forged papers and a husband at her elbow. Put a stranger in the right coat, hand her the right license, surround her with people behaving as if she belongs, and most witnesses quiet their own doubts. How did he find her, I asked. An audition, Roy said. A revival at the Riverside Playhouse. He went twice, then started paying her hotel bill. There were photographs. Gordon entering the hotel. Wade meeting Cassidy at a coffee shop. Paige carrying a garment bag into room 614. One showed Gordon in a parking lot, reaching out to adjust the angle of her shoulders. I looked at that one the longest. He was teaching her how to be me. After 36 years, he knew which knee stiffened when I stood, how I tilted my head, the way I pressed my lips before I refused something. Everything I had counted as proof of being known had become instructions for my replacement. She was in the Saturday matinee. I could have had her arrested before she cleaned off the makeup, but that would give me one frightened actress, while Gordon and Wade denied everything and the aide vanished for good. Cassidy was not the wall. She was a loose panel over it. I needed her to open it, not fall off. At 4:15, the stage door opened and the cast spilled into the alley under umbrellas. Cassidy came out last in a long beige coat, a grocery bag in one arm, and stopped to light a cigarette. I crossed the street before Roy could ask if I was ready. She saw me at 20 feet. The cigarette dropped into a puddle. For a moment we stood facing each other like two versions of the same woman split apart by the choices that had shaped us. You are, Valerie, she whispered. The real one. You wore my mother's brooch, I said. Her eyes darted to the door. I can explain. Then explain. She backed against the brick. Your husband said you were sick, that you had episodes and refused care, that the bank needed you in person because the memory place required a deposit, and he held authority. Did he also tell you to sign my name, I asked. He said the power of attorney made it legal. Her voice shook, but I have sat with enough frightened people to know terror from innocence. She was afraid. She was not surprised by the word fraud. How much, I asked. 12,000, she said, looking away. For helping them take 540, I said. I did not know the amount until we were inside. But you stayed. They gave me 4 up front, she said. Gordon promised the rest. I owe rent. I owe people. You do not know what it is like when every call is somebody asking for money you do not have. You are right, I said. But I know what it is to have someone take a life you spent 30 years building and call it necessity. She flinched. I stepped closer, not to threaten, but to close the distance that let her pretend I was only a name on a form. Look at me, Cassidy. Not the coat. Me. They mean to have me declared incompetent, sell my home, take my retirement, and use my name to bury something my son did at his clinic. You helped them start that. Tears filled her eyes. I did not know all of that. Then tell me what you do know. She glanced at Roy's car. Is he police? No. Are you recording me? Yes. The honesty startled her. People who live among manipulators expect to be handled, and a plain answer feels more dangerous than a lie. I took out an envelope with $15,000. Her eyes fixed on it. This is more than Gordon paid you, I said. There is more when this is finished. Legal help. A treatment program if you want to stop drinking. What do you want me to do? Keep working for them. Her eyes went wide. You want me to be you again? I want them to believe nothing has changed. You go to every meeting. You answer every call. You send me everything they tell you. And here is the part that matters. In this state, I can lawfully record any conversation I take part in, but not one I am absent from. You are present for the ones I cannot reach. When they talk in front of you, you record it. From now on, when you wear my face, you work for me." She stared at the envelope. "If Gordon finds out, he will ruin me." "Gordon chose you because he thought you were already ruined," I said. "That is how men like him work. They find where a person is weakest and call the taking of it an opportunity. I am offering a way out. I am not offering trust. You earn that one decision at a time." She took the money. Her fingers were cold. "There is a doctor," she said. "Leland Frost. Gordon says he handles families like ours. I am supposed to go in as you fail the memory tests and sign a statement saying Wade should manage your affairs." When I asked. "They moved it up. After the bank, they changed it to tomorrow morning. Wade is panicking about some records. Once the doctor signs, they can move you somewhere before you cause trouble." There is no somewhere in 3 days, I thought. Not lawfully. In this state, a real incompetency case runs through the clerk of court, a petition, a multidisciplinary evaluation, a guardian appointed to represent me, a hearing where I have a lawyer. None of that happens in a week, which meant the doctor's paper was never meant to stand in front of a judge. It was meant to prop up a coerced power of attorney and a forged voluntary admission form so they could act before any hearing existed to stop them. "Tomorrow," I said, "you will not go to that appointment." "I will." Her face drained. "But they think I am you. That is why Gordon will believe I am confused enough to cooperate." "Valerie," she called as I turned. "There is one more thing. Your husband gave the doctor your medical records weeks ago. The diagnosis may already be written." I looked back at the woman who had stolen my face and just become my first witness. "Then tomorrow," I said, "we find out how much my husband paid to have my mind erased on paper. If your own family sat you down and tried to sign away your mind while you were fully aware of every word, would you expose them on the spot or stay quiet long enough to learn the whole of it? Tell me in the comments before I show you what I signed." Gordon laid my clothes across the bed before sunrise, as if dressing a woman who could no longer dress herself. Gray sweatpants, a shapeless shirt, an old cardigan, slip-on shoes I had worn once after ankle surgery. My tailored slacks and pressed blouses stayed in the closet. He wanted Leland Frost to see a helpless woman before I opened my mouth. "You should be comfortable," he said when he caught me looking. His voice was warm. That was the worst of it. Cruelty is easy to recognize when it shouts. The dangerous kind brings you coffee and lays out your clothes and tells you every freedom it takes is for your own good. He drove us inland under a sky the color of wet cement. I sat with a recorder sewn into the middle button of my cardigan. My lawyer, Corinne Adler, had it live from her office. Because I was a party to every conversation it would capture, every word was lawful and clean. I had also pressed a small patch under my ribs that tracked my heart rate and location. Courage without a backup is just optimism in a serious coat. When I reached for the door at a gas station, it would not open. "Child locks. Safety," Gordon said. "You have been confused lately." "Have I tried to get out of a moving car?" I said. "Not yet," he said, and laughed, and neither of us believed it was a joke. The office sat behind a payday lender under a sign of a silver tree with roots shaped like nerves. No other patients. No one at the desk. A camera in the corner. Frost opened the inner door before Gordon finished signing my name on the visitor sheet. Late 50s expensive glasses, the restless eyes of a man who had already spent money he had not yet earned. His office held 2 chairs, a desk, and a camera on a tripod pointed at the patient's seat. No models, no testing kit, no photographs. It looked less like a place where medicine happened than a room built to produce one recording. Gordon sat beside the camera, not in the hall. "I thought memory testing was usually private," I said. "In complicated cases, family input helps," Frost said. "You have not established my case is complicated," I said. His mouth tightened. I had spoken too clearly. I dropped my eyes. "Sorry, I get nervous." "That is one of her moods," Gordon said. "She turns argumentative, then forgets why." Frost opened a folder with my name on the tab. Thick, but under the top form was only blank paper. "What year is it?" he asked. I gave a year 3 years gone. "Who is the governor?" I named the wrong one. He set a pen, a key, and a coin on the desk. "Remember these 3, he said, then immediately asked me to name them back. "A pencil, a lock, and a button," I said. Gordon exhaled as if it hurt him. Frost did not ask whether I could hear him, whether I took medication, whether I had slept, whether stress might shape the result. A real capacity assessment takes hours. History, standardized scales, blood work, independent observation. I had watched dozens done properly over 30 years. Frost reached his conclusion in under 4 minutes. The deficits appear substantial, he said into the camera. Disorientation impaired recall, limited insight. I looked at the empty folder. Can 3 questions decide that I said? Gordon's head turned sharply. Frost stopped writing. For a moment they stared, recalculating. Then I smiled, mild and vague. I am sorry. What were we talking about? The tension eased. People see what they need to see. Gordon needed a confused wife, so every clear moment became an accident. Frost took a prepared stack from a drawer. These forms let your husband assist with medical, financial, and residential decisions. Assist. Another clean word wrapped around an ugly thing. I read the headings upside down. Durable power of attorney. Property disposition authorization. Voluntary residential placement. Financial management agreement. They were handing him my home, my accounts, my body, and the right to decide where I woke up. I do not want to sign those, I said. Val, we discussed this, Gordon said, moving closer. No, I said. You discussed it with Wade. His hand closed around my wrist under the desk, hard enough to hurt, hidden from the camera. Sign the papers, he whispered. Then we go home, and if I do not, I said. Frost cleaned his glasses. Refusal can itself indicate poor judgment. If we believe a patient is a danger to herself, we can begin a hold for observation. Where I asked. There is a secure unit downstairs. The building had 1 floor. Frost pushed a pen across the desk. Just sign at the tabs. I picked it up. Years earlier, after a family threatened me during a bad case, Corinne and I had agreed on a private signal for documents signed under pressure. A small triangle beneath the signature. It would not undo the papers. It would establish before any dispute that I had marked coercion at the moment it happened. My hand shook as I wrote Valerie Colton. Under the name, I drew the triangle. Gordon saw weakness. Frost saw compliance. Corinne, listening, saw a flare go up. I signed 4 times while my husband watched my name leave my hand in black ink. Frost slid the documents into a sealed envelope and accepted a thicker one from Gordon. Cash. Neither man bothered to hide it. They had already decided my memory could not hold the sight of it. On the drive home, Gordon talked about lunch, as though he had not just purchased the paper, meant to end me. My phone buzzed. A message from Corinne on the locked screen. Signal received. Recording secure. Then one from Cassidy. It is not only your money and your land. Wade forged your nursing signature on patient assessments to keep the clinic billing, and to bury a death. Gordon believed he had proven I could no longer understand the world. In truth, he had gathered his threat, his bribed doctor, his cash payment, and my marked signature into a single clean chain and handed it to me. But my satisfaction did not last. Somewhere patients had trusted charts that carried my name. Somewhere a family had said goodbye sooner than they had to. I closed my eyes and did what I had always done. I reconstructed the death, working backward from the outcome to the small failure that started it. I would not confront him about the clinic. A frightened person demands answers because silence is unbearable. An investigator learns to sit inside the silence until the facts can survive every excuse. He let me walk upstairs, laid a blanket over my legs, and kissed my forehead before he left. I waited until his car was gone, then called Corinne. The threats are clear, she said. So is the cash. Your marked signature gives us leverage on the documents. But if this reaches healthcare fraud, we need evidence that stands on its own apart from you. I know where to look, I said. Colton House kept its offices off Market Street. Wade had given me a badge years ago, back when he still liked telling people his mother had spent 30 years nursing the dying. He liked my career when it made him look serious. He only started calling me difficult when my questions cut into profit. I changed into dark slacks and the lace-up boots Gordon had tried to swap that morning. By dusk, the sky had gone to a sheet of gray metal. The building looked closed. My badge still opened the side door. A single lamp burned in the records room. Colton House kept digital charts, but federal rules require paper backups for the clinical certifications that justify hospice billing, the documents that say a patient is expected to die within 6 months, the documents that unlock the money. A nurse's assessment sits under each one. My assessment. My signature. I found the binder for the past 2 years. There was my name over and over certifying patients I had never seen in a clinic I had not worked at since I walked away. The signatures were close enough to fool anyone who had never watched me sign 1,000 charts. The straight final stroke on Colton every time. No hitch. I turned the pages and found the pattern I had smelled from a distance. Patients admitted who were not dying certified as terminal, so the clinic could bill for months of care, discharged alive when an audit loomed, readmitted under a new certification. Each wore my forged name like a borrowed uniform. Then I found the chart Cassidy meant. An elderly man certified terminal on a date I could prove I had spent at a conference in Raleigh. His medication record showed a powerful pain drug at doses far beyond what his chart justified. The counts did not match the pharmacy logs. Someone had been diverting the drug, siphoning it off to sell, and covering the gap by charting it as given to a patient who then died of an overdose. A real nurse would have caught days earlier. Curtis Boyd Aide had signed the last 3 entries. My forged certification sat on top of all of it, the respectable signature that made a stolen death look peaceful. I photographed every page. Behind the binder, invoices from a supply broker, payment records initialed by Page, and the pricing list again longer. Curtis Boyd, $35,000 paid, 20 more after closing. My son had not only stolen from a public program, he had let a man die to hide a theft and used my name to sign the lie. I scanned everything to Corinne's secure server and put the binder back exactly as I found it. My hands were steady. That frightened me more than shaking would have. A door opened near the offices. I stepped into the shadow of a supply rack. Wade came down the hall with his phone to his ear and a glass in his other hand, thinner than at lunch gray under the light. "I do not care what Meridian wants," he said. "The aide gets the rest after the property closes." He paused. "No, Boyd will not talk. Page paid him. And if he does, we have Mom's certification on every chart. Who do they believe, a nurse with a dementia diagnosis or her own signature?" My name sounded wrong in his mouth. Not loving, useful. He moved toward the records room close enough that I saw a dark stain still on his cuff. His eyes went to the binder on the desk. He reached for it. Then another call flashed and he cursed and turned away. "Dad, I am handling it," he said. "Frost signed everything. Once the land sells, we settle the patient claims, correct the counts, and this disappears." He listened, then laughed without warmth. "Mom spent her whole career protecting strangers after they died. She can give up one piece of land to protect her own family." The words went into me harder than anger. I remembered Wade at 7 on the floor with a broken model plane asking why machines fall out of the sky. I had told him they almost never fall for one reason. Most disasters are chains, and everyone who ignores a warning becomes another link. Somewhere my son stopped asking why things fail and started calculating how much failure he could hide. I went back toward the offices. I slipped out the side into the rain. My phone buzzed. A recording from Cassidy Lawful because she was in the room, 3 voices around a table. "The investigator called again," Page said. "He knows the drug counts were altered." "Then wipe the purchase files tonight," Wade answered. "Not until Valerie is at Cedar Hollow," Gordon said. "If she disappears before the paperwork is filed, people ask questions." "Why are you doing this part yourself?" Page asked. Wade could handle the land. Gordon laughed low and without humor. "Because for 36 years I have been introduced as Valerie's husband. At dinners they asked about her patients. At the hospital galas they wanted her stories. Even the house people call it Valerie's place, though I have lived in it just as long. She always stood in the light while I held her coat. When this is done, she will live where I choose, spend what I allow, and sign what I put in front of her. For once, she will exist by my permission." Page was quiet. Then she said, "What about Nora's trust?" "Once Wade controls Valerie's affairs, Gordon said we move that too." I stood in the rain and let the truth settle. Gordon did not only want my money, he wanted to reverse the whole balance of our life. Every compliment I had been paid had become an insult he stored in silence. And my granddaughter's name is what stopped whatever grief remained from becoming hesitation. Nora was 9. She still believed her family would keep her safe. I called Corinne. "Send everything to the Federal Health Office and the fraud unit," I said. "Copy the fraud investigators at the bank." "That triggers a full inquiry," she said. "Good. And Nora's trust. I set that up myself years ago," I said. "It is irrevocable, and it already has an independent trustee. They cannot touch the principal. But confirm it and remove Gordon as any successor tonight. Valerie, once we file, there is no going back." I looked at the dark clinic where my forged name sat certifying the dead. "They crossed that line before I knew there was one," I said. The next morning, Corinne called while Gordon was downstairs making coffee and performing a marriage. "They filed the property transfer," she said. "Closing is Friday. $4,200,000. I watched Gordon move around the counter, humming, laying out my breakfast. "We can block it now," Corinne said. "Do not," I said. "If we stop the sale, they retreat. They shred records. They blame a confused woman for misreading paperwork, and the drug diversion vanishes with the rest. If they believe it is moving forward, they bring every document, every account, every accomplice, and every ounce of their greed into one room. Let them sign." Gordon looked up as if he had heard me, but the distance between us was too far to cross. He smiled and lifted my coffee cup toward me. I smiled back. He believed Friday would be the day I began living by his permission. He did not know it would be the day the whole thing came apart from the inside. Friday came bright and cold, the Cape Fear turned to hammered steel. Gordon dressed in the navy suit he wore whenever he wanted strangers to believe honesty had been tailored into the cloth. He put a hand on my shoulder, said he had a paperwork to handle with Wade, kissed my cheek, picked up the leather portfolio that held the documents meant to erase me, and walked out smiling. Arrogance is rarely dramatic. It is only a man leaving his own house without checking whether the woman he betrayed is watching him go. The closing was at Meridian Care Group's offices downtown, 12 floors above the water. Corinne had arranged everything with the federal investigators and the bank fraud unit. Meridian was real, but its executives had agreed to cooperate the moment they saw the forged medical records and the attempted transfer. The escrow platform was real too. What was not real was the receiving account. The fraud unit had built it as a controlled ledger. It could display a balance accept transfer instructions and record every destination, and it would never release a single dollar. Gordon believed he was walking into a property sale. He was walking into a room where every word became evidence against him. I watched from a secure office 1 floor down with Corinne, 2 federal investigators, and a compliance officer from the bank. On the monitor, Cassidy came in wearing my cream coat, silver-framed glasses, and a copy of the brooch, the original, safe in my pocket. Gordon steered her by the elbow like a man moving something he owned. Wade and Paige followed, dressed for an awards ceremony. Greed does not always look wild. Sometimes it arrives early and signs in blue ink. The escrow attorney confirmed the property. "Do you understand you are selling the waterfront parcel, the residence, the cottage, and the acreage for $4,200,000? Cassidy looked toward Gordon exactly as we had drilled. "I believe so." Gordon smiled. Valerie gets overwhelmed by legal detail. The attorney did not smile. "I need her answer." She answered. She said she believes she understands. "I need her to explain it." Gordon's jaw tightened, but he leaned back. "In your own words, what are you selling?" Cassidy took a breath. "My home, the land around it, the cottage and the garden." "And where do the proceeds go?" "Into an account my husband manages. For my care." Her voice held. Then the attorney asked the one question none of us had prepared for. "How long have you owned the property?" Cassidy froze. Corinne looked at me. The floor seemed to tilt. The true answer was 21 years. Cassidy knew the price, the acreage, the closing date. We had never rehearsed the history of the land. Gordon turned toward her slowly. "Val." Cassidy looked at the deed. "A long time." "How long?" the attorney repeated. Gordon's eyes narrowed. He was no longer seeing a confused wife. He was seeing an actress who might have dropped her line. 21 years, I whispered, though there was no way she could hear me. Corinne pressed a finger to her earpiece. Cassidy wore a receiver under the wig, but the transmitter had gone quiet. A red light blinked. Signal lost. Gordon leaned close. "We bought it after Wade finished college," he said, offering her a path without the answer. Was that 20 years ago or more? Panic climbed into Cassidy's face. People imagine courage is the absence of fear, but fear is part of every real act of courage. The only choice is whether you let it speak for you. She turned back to the attorney. 21 years, she said. We closed in October during the first big storm of the season. The year was right, but the storm was not on any document. It came from a night I had described to Cassidy during our first session, one memory she had absorbed without knowing it might one day save her. The attorney moved on. Gordon did not. He set his hand over Cassidy's wrist. "What did we eat the night we first signed for this land?" he asked quietly. That was not a legal question. It was a test. He had felt the seam and was pressing on it. Cassidy's face emptied. I remembered the night clearly. Fish and chips out of a paper box eaten on the unfinished dock while the rain came sideways. Gordon had laughed because the wind took his napkin into the water. No document held that. Corinne switched to a backup transmitter. Static burst through the room. I leaned into the microphone. Fish and chips, I said. On the dock. His napkin blew into the water and he chased it with a boat hook. The light went green for half a second, then red. Cassidy swallowed. You do not remember, Gordon said. Fish and chips, she said suddenly. On the unfinished dock. You spent 10 minutes trying to reach your napkin with a boat hook. Gordon stared. The detail was enough. His suspicions softened into something worse satisfaction. That is right, he said. He believed she had remembered. In truth, the woman he had hired to replace me had just been rescued by the memory of the woman he meant to erase. The attorney went on. Has anyone pressured you to complete this transaction? Cassidy paused just long enough for Gordon to shift. No, my family is helping me. Page after page crossed the table. Deed, escrow instructions, a separate agreement naming Gordon sole manager of the proceeds. Halfway through, the notary asked Cassidy to explain what control Gordon would have over the money. Before she could answer, Gordon said, She does not need to understand every banking detail. I hold power of attorney. I asked her, the notary said. And I answered, Gordon snapped. She has been diagnosed with severe cognitive decline. My authority exists because she cannot make these decisions. The room went still. In the office below, an investigator marked the exact time. Gordon had just told a room full of witnesses that the woman signing a voluntary sale was, in his own words, incapable of consenting to it. Arrogant people believe intimidation proves authority. In a legal room, it usually only proves intent. Cassidy signed the last page. The attorney entered the authorization code and the wall monitor displayed $4,200,000 received. Gordon stared at the number like a man seeing his first sunrise. Wade laughed. Paige pressed both hands to her mouth and began to cry. I had never seen the three of them so united. There is a particular grief in learning your disappearance as the event that finally makes your family happy. Within minutes, Gordon tried to move $800,000 toward a private jet share. Wade issued payment to 2 creditors. Paige placed a deposit on a villa in Cabo. Not one transfer settled, but each one lit up a device, a shell company, an overseas account in the name of someone they meant to pay with my stolen land. By the time they left, the investigators had gathered more than they expected in a month. My phone buzzed. A message from Cassidy. I almost lost him. He is watching me now. Corrine read it over my shoulder. We should pull her out. Not yet, I said. Another message. Tomorrow night they are announcing the Meridian expansion. On your land. Gordon wants me there as you. He says the real Valerie goes to Cedar Hollow before the party starts. That was how Gordon had solved the problem of 2 Valeries. He would remove one. Tomorrow he would set the imitation beside him in public, in front of investors and neighbors, while the real woman vanished behind locked doors. He believed he had controlled every version of me. He had no idea I was about to walk into my own garden and make him look at both. Gordon arranged for me to disappear 3 hours before the party. At 4, a white medical transport van pulled into the drive, and a woman in navy scrubs came up the walk with a clipboard that had my name across the top. Gordon stood behind her, one hand on my shoulder, performing concern for an audience of 1. This is Bonnie, he said. She is taking you to Cedar Hollow tonight so you can settle in before the weekend. His sedan was already loaded with his tuxedo. He had dressed me again in the useless clothes. I thought we were going together, I said. I will visit tomorrow, he said and kissed my forehead. Tonight is just paperwork. People who betray you keep using the familiar gestures because without them they might have to admit what they are doing. Bonnie guided me into the van. The doors shut and the locks engaged. Cedar Hollow was 3 hours inland. The van never reached the highway. Corrine had identified the transport company from Gordon's messages, and Bonnie Reese had agreed to work with the investigators. I had not been forced into anything. I had chosen to climb into that van because it was the surest way to put myself exactly where I needed to be while everyone believed I was gone. 10 minutes out, Bonnie turned into a commuter lot under the bridge, unlocked the doors, and handed me a garment bag. Your lawyer said you would know what to do. I changed in the back while the rain rattled the roof. When I stepped out, the confused woman Gordon had sent away no longer existed. Roy waited in my Subaru with a temporary badge and a radio tuned to the investigators. Cassidy is already inside, he said. Gordon has not left her alone for more than 30 seconds. Is she holding? Barely. The land I had loved for 21 years had been turned into a stage set. Lights strung through the live oaks. Rented tables ringed the lawn up to the edge of the benches. A quartet played near a platform hung with a banner. Meridian Care Group. The Future of Compassion. I went in the back way down to the old boathouse and up through the cottage Gordon had never bothered to learn because it was not impressive enough to show guests. The route led to the sunroom above the lawn where a panel ran the sound and the screens Meridian had installed. From behind the tinted glass, I could see Cassidy seated beside my husband in my coat, the wig, the brooch. She was the only Valerie anyone had seen all evening. Gordon introduced her to investors as his brave wife, explaining that although her memory was failing, she had generously chosen to secure the family's future. Every time someone praised her sacrifice, he squeezed Cassidy's hand, reminding her of the role she had agreed to play. At 7:45, Wade stepped onto the platform with Paige. "Tonight marks a new era," he said. Applause rolled across the lawn. Behind him, the screen showed rendered suites and smiling residents. "Thanks to a major partnership and the acquisition of this remarkable waterfront property, we are building the finest memory care campus on the coast." He could not say my home. Plain language would have made the evening too honest. Gordon joined him and drew Cassidy forward. "This is possible because of family," he said. "My wife Valerie understood that a legacy sometimes means stepping aside so the next generation can rise." The guests applauded the woman wearing my face. For a moment, the old ache closed around my chest, not because the crowd believed him, but because he knew exactly which words would make me sound noble while he buried me. Cassidy glanced up at the sunroom. Her fingers touched the brooch twice. The signal. Corinne's voice came through my earpiece. "The bank fraud unit has the transfer attempts. The federal investigators have their warrants. Adler is at the gate with the court order. You can go." Wade lifted his glass to the Future of Compassion. I entered the administrator code. The screen went black. The music cut out. Every light on the lawn died except the emergency strips along the path and the cold blue glow off the water. A murmur moved through the guests. Gordon looked up. "What happened?" His own voice answered through the speakers. "When Valerie is at Cedar Hollow, no one will listen to anything she says." The lawn went silent. Then Paige's recorded voice. "What about Nora's trust?" And Gordon again. "Once Wade controls Valerie's affairs, we move that too." A glass shattered on the flagstones. The screen came back with the bank footage Gordon beside Cassidy as she signed my name. Then the forged certifications scrolled past page after page carrying my signature over patients I had never met. Then Frost's voice filled the garden. "There is a secure unit downstairs for patients who refuse to cooperate." And Gordon's low and close. "Sign the papers or we leave you here." Investors began moving toward the drive. One lender demanded to know where the proceeds had gone. Another shouted that Wade had used falsified documents to secure financing. Wade grabbed the microphone. "This is fabricated," he said. "My mother has been diagnosed with severe cognitive decline." That was when Cassidy stood, reached up, and pulled off the silver wig. Her own hair fell loose. "Put that back on," Gordon whispered. "Now." "No," she said, shaking, but still. "I am done wearing the woman you tried to erase." He grabbed for her wrist. Two of the security officers Corinne had placed stepped between them. That was when I opened the sunroom door and started down the outside stairs. My heels struck the wood one step at a time. Heads turned up. Gordon looked and his face came apart as I descended in my navy suit, my mother's real brooch at my collar, the face he had spent weeks teaching another woman to copy. He had believed I was 3 hours inland, drugged and frightened. Instead, I walked into the center of my own garden while the imitation he had bought stood beside him without her disguise. "Valerie," he breathed. "You are supposed to be gone." "Am I said. The screen changed behind me. The altered drug counts. The dead patient's chart with my forged certification on top. Travel records laid beside each false signature proving I had been in Raleigh and Wilmington in a hospital bed on the days I supposedly certified those charts. Wade snatched the microphone again. "My mother is not competent." I stepped onto the platform beside him. "Then explain," I said, "how a woman who cannot understand the world forged proof of being in 3 cities on the dates your clinic says she was certifying your patients." "A man died, Wade. You certified him dying so you could bill for him, you let his medication walk out the door, and you signed my name to the top of it." Gordon pushed past the officers and pointed at me. "I have legal authority over this woman." "No," Corinne said, coming up the path. "You do not." She held the court order that voided the coerced documents, suspended the power of attorney, and froze every asset tied to the sale. Behind her came the federal investigators, the bank fraud unit, and 2 county officers. Out on the drive, headlights appeared red and blue light sweeping across the tables and the water and the faces of people who had come to celebrate my removal. Wade looked from the officers to me, and for the first time all evening, he looked like my son, and not a man on a stage. "Mom," he whispered. "What did you do?" I looked at Gordon beside the woman he had paid to become me then at the garden lit up in emergency red where every bench held a name I had sat beside at the end. I made sure I said that when the truth arrived, there would be only one Valerie Colton left standing in it. The lead agent came up the path with his badge raised. For a few seconds, no one moved. Champagne kept fizzing in abandoned glasses. It looked like the end of a party and the beginning of an autopsy. "No one leaves," he said. "Phones on the nearest table, hands where I can see them." That was when the loyalty in the garden began to fail. Loyalty built on money rarely survives consequences. One investor swore he had known nothing about the forged certifications. A lender demanded that Gordon explain the escrow account. 2 clinic employees stepped away from Paige as though guilt could travel by touch. Gordon found me and came toward me with both hands raised. "Valerie, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them you agreed to the sale." "Which one of me agreed?" I said, and looked toward Cassidy, standing beside Corinne without the wig. An agent stepped between us. Across the garden, Wade argued with the health investigators. My mother signed the assessments. The investigator held up a forged certification. "Your mother has provided records showing she was in another city on that date, and 11 others. She set me up," Wade said. "She has hated my clinic since the day it opened. It is easier to call the truth hatred than to admit that someone warned you before the damage was done. I questioned your admissions," I said. "You called that interference. You never believed in me. Believing in you never required me to believe your lies." Paige was crying by the tables. An investigator had opened her laptop. "I only handled the invoices," she said. "Wade made the decisions." Wade turned on her so fast it looked rehearsed by panic. "You created the vendor accounts. You paid Boyd, because you told me to. You knew what the charts were." "Both of you stop talking," Gordon said. The agent beside him almost smiled. "That is the first sensible thing anyone has said tonight." But the seal was broken. Paige pointed at Gordon. He planned the impersonation. He found Cassidy. He took her passport and her license and her nursing credentials out of the safe. "You ungrateful little liar," Gordon said. "You said no one would ever believe her," Paige said, "because she would be locked away before she could testify." The garden went quieter. An accusation from a victim can be dismissed. A family member repeating the plan in front of witnesses becomes something heavier. 2 officers walked Leland Frost up the path in handcuffs, his glasses gone, his tie loose. An investigator asked him to identify the people who had paid for the false diagnosis. He looked at Gordon, then Wade, then Paige. "All 3, he said. Gordon lunged, and the officers caught him. "You said the records were protected. You paid me in marked cash in a room with 3 cameras, Frost said. Cassidy handed an investigator her phone. "The messages are all there," she said. "The rehearsal schedule, the bank instructions, recordings of Gordon teaching me her signature." Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. Courage is not the absence of shame. Sometimes it is what a person does after finally admitting the shame is deserved. Gordon stared at her, as if betrayal were a privilege reserved only for him. "I saved you," he said. "You used me," she said. "There is a difference." Agents bagged evidence around the garden. The wig, Frost's report, laptops. Wade watched his life become a crime scene, one labeled bag at a time. Then he made his last mistake. He shoved past an investigator and ran not toward the drive, but toward the boathouse, toward the water, as if there were anywhere left to go. 3 officers brought him down on the wet grass and cuffed his wrists. "Mom," he shouted, "help me." The word struck a place no plan had prepared me to protect. A mother can know her child is guilty and still hear every younger version of him inside a single cry. Love does not vanish when someone becomes dangerous. It only stops being permission to save them from the consequences. "I tried to help you years ago," I said. "You called every warning an insult." Paige was arrested next and asked for a lawyer at once and offered access to the overseas accounts in exchange for cooperation. Gordon watched them both led away, then changed his strategy one more time. He came toward me slowly while an agent readied the cuffs. "Valerie, 36 years. I took care of you. You chose my clothes for a doctor who had already sold my diagnosis," I said. "I made mistakes. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary," I said. You hired a woman to wear my face. He lowered his voice until it was almost intimate. I still love you. I looked at the man who had learned every detail of me and used all of it to build my replacement. If you loved me, I said, why did you need another woman to become me before you could touch her gently? He had no answer. The agent turned him and fastened the cuffs, and the performance finally ended. You think you won, he shouted as they walked him toward the vehicles. The $4.2 million is gone. I moved it somewhere your investigators will never find. Corrine glanced at me. I said nothing. Gordon smiled at my silence and mistook it for fear. I will be out before you know it, he said. And when I am, I will take apart everything you built. They put him in a waiting car. I stood in the garden and watched the door close. I had exposed my husband, my son, and Paige. And still it felt nothing like triumph. It felt like surviving a slow death in the next room, then learning that the people you wanted beside you had been the ones turning off the machines. Are you going to tell him? Corrine asked. Not tonight, I said. He believed $4,200,000 waited for him in a hidden account. He believed he still held one last weapon. Sometimes the cleanest justice is letting a guilty man carry his hope a little longer so that at the right moment he understands it was never real. Gordon still believed the money existed when I visited him 7 weeks later at the county detention center. He came in wearing a gray uniform and the same controlled expression he had used for decades when a deal was collapsing, but he needed everyone to keep smiling. You look tired, he said. The house must feel empty. It does, I said. That pleased him. My lawyer says Cassidy is unreliable, he said, leaning in. Frost is only talking to save himself. Wade will never testify against his own father. Most of what you have is noise. Wade accepted a cooperation agreement, I said. The confidence in his face faltered. He would not. He gave the investigators access to 3 offshore accounts and explained how you copied my identification. He is frightened, Gordon said. He will say anything. Paige said the same about you, I said, and set a thin folder on the table. Inside were copies of the controlled ledger and every transfer he had attempted after the closing. You came to negotiate, he said. No. Then why bring paperwork? Because the last time I saw you, I said you told me you still had enough money to take apart everything I built. His mouth curved. I do. Show me where I said. He sat back. You think I am stupid. I think you were reaching for money that never left the bank, I said. The smile stayed half a second longer than his confidence did. I watched the balance appear, he said. I moved the funds myself. You moved numbers inside a ledger built by the fraud unit, I said, and opened the folder. The balance existed only on your screen. The sale never closed. Meridian cooperated from the first day. You are lying. The jet share never reached the broker. The villa was never reserved. Your creditors got notices generated by the investigators. But every destination you entered was recorded. The Nevada company led them to a Cayman account. That account led them to money you hid from former clients years ago. Gordon stopped breathing for a moment. Every time he had tried to enjoy what he believed was my stolen fortune, he had opened another hidden room in his own financial life. Greed had done in a night what subpoenas might have taken months to do. It had talked him into drawing the map himself. How much did they find? He asked quietly. A little over $2 million, I said, not counting what was hidden under Wade's clinic. That money is mine, he said. Some of it belonged to clients. Some came from fraudulent loans. The rest goes to the patients your son harmed, to the families, to restitution. The hatred that came into his face was almost a relief. It was more honest than the concern he had performed while laying out my clothes. You destroyed your own family, he said. Wade let a man die to cover a theft and signed my name to it, I said. Paige moved the money. Cassidy told the truth and went into treatment. You paid a stranger to become me because you could not stand that people loved me more than they respected you. He struck the table with both hands, the chain at his waist snapping against the metal. The guard stepped forward. I raised one hand. 36 years, Gordon said lower now. You leave me with nothing. You left yourself with nothing, I said. I only stopped you from taking mine. People who cross every line tend to blame the door for finally closing, never the hand that reached too far. What happened to Nora's trust, he asked. It is managed by an independent trustee, I said. You, Wade, and Paige have no access. You never did. You cut her off from her parents. I protected her from the people who tried to steal from her. She will hate you for it, he said. And that one landed because part of it was already true. Nora had refused to see me for months. Once she asked why I had sent her father to prison as if I had signed the charts. Children understand absence before they understand evidence. To her, Wade was simply gone. Paige was awaiting sentencing, and I was the grandmother who had stood at the center of the blast. She may, I said. But she will grow up with something left in her name. You think a trust replaces a father, he said. No, I said, and my voice nearly failed, but I held it. Nothing replaces what he chose to become. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Valerie, he said softer. Was any of it real? He was not asking about the money. For a moment, the visitation room dropped away, and I saw our first apartment, a card table between two mismatched chairs, Wade asleep on Gordon's chest during a thunderstorm, the younger version of my husband waiting outside a terminal after one of my longest weeks on a case. It was real to me, I said. That is exactly why you were able to use it. The guard called the end of the visit. I gathered the papers. Gordon did not ask me to come back. A year after the night, the agents came up my garden path. Wade pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud, falsifying records, wire fraud, and identity theft. A patient death was folded into the sentencing as a result of the drug diversion he had concealed. Paige cooperated early and received a shorter term, though she was permanently barred from managing medical funds. Leland Frost lost his license and was convicted of fraud and taking bribes. Gordon received the longest sentence because the investigators uncovered years of financial crimes that had nothing to do with me. Men who build their lives out of hidden rooms eventually forget how many doors they have left unlocked. The land stayed mine. The sale had never closed. Meridian withdrew. The memorial garden survived. The benches are still out there under the live oaks, one for every year I nursed, and families still drive out to sit on them. Cassidy finished treatment, relapsed once, and called me before she meant to vanish for good. She came back the next morning. Recovery did not make her flawless. It made her willing to tell the truth before the lie became another home. I hired her as an outreach coordinator at the small nonprofit I opened in the old clinic space off Market Street. We help older people and their families understand capacity evaluations so that no one signs away a mind that is still present. People trust a woman who has been on the other side of a lie. I survived too, though not in the clean way people prefer at the end of a story. I could not sleep in the bedroom Gordon and I had shared. I moved into the guest room because the sound of rain on the original windows brought back the night he came home with a gift from a place he had never been. Wade wrote me 3 letters from prison. I opened the first 2 and found explanations dressed as apologies. The third is still sealed in my desk. Some mornings I put my hand on the envelope and wonder whether not opening it is strength or fear. I have never found an answer I trust. Nora agreed to visit again after 4 months of silence. She did not run into my arms. She sat across the table and asked hard questions in a voice too old for 9. I answered every one and did not ask her to forgive me. Love does not entitle us to forgiveness on our own schedule. Sometimes all we can do is stay honest long enough for another person to decide whether trust can grow back. On the anniversary of the arrests, Nora stood beside me at the edge of the garden while I sat with a hospice patient I had taken on privately, an old friend from my nursing years who had asked me to see her through. Her mind wandered and returned the way minds do at the end. I held her hand and told her the day and the season and who was in the room the way I had told 1,000 patients before her, because a person deserves to be treated as present, right up until they are not. Her family had asked me quietly whether she still understood anything at all. She does, I told them. She is still in there. You just have to be willing to sit long enough to see it. That was the whole of what my family had tried to deny about me, turned back into the thing I was best at. They had tried to sign away a mind that was fully present and call it mercy. I had spent 30 years proving that a present mind is worth sitting with, even when it flickers, even when it is inconvenient, even when the people around the bed would find it easier if it were already gone. Nora slipped her hand into mine, not tightly, just enough. If the people you loved tried to erase your voice and take the life you built, could you forgive them? Or would protecting yourself have to be enough? Tell me what you would do and subscribe if you believe healing can be real, even when the scar stays. The wind came off the water and moved through the oaks, and the old woman in the chair turned her face toward it and smiled at something none of us could see. My life was not repaired. Some things cannot be put back the way they were, but they can be made safe again, strong enough to carry weight, honest enough to survive the next storm, and present all the way to the end.